Welcome to the 2021 Orange County Realtors Annual Membership Meeting and Market Forecast. I'm your president-elect for 2021. My name is Adam Rodell. Before we begin, please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. If you're able to stand, please do so and place your hand over your heart. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. At this time, I would like to introduce our meeting sponsor, J&J Coastal Lending, and Mr. John Soroselli. John, take it away.
Well, good morning, Orange County Realtors. On behalf of J&J Coastal Lending, I am pleased to bring you the 2021 Annual Meeting and Market Forecast. My name is John Soroselli, and it gives me great pleasure to introduce your 2021 President, Lori Namazi, along with her executive team, Adam Rodell, Joyce Endo, and Danielle Corliss. Before introducing President Lori, I wanted to let you know that J&J Coastal Lending is a proud affiliate member of Orange County Realtors. And when thinking about what the most impactful thing I could share with you today about myself and our company, I felt it would be our mission statement. And our mission statement is, from hello, we positively impact the lives of others by creating a personal home loan experience so unique, their joy and excitement is uncontainable. And the reason I share that with you today is because I believe that a minimum point of entry for any mortgage lender participating in helping you and your clients is having great rates, diverse loan programs. But by us creating that personal, unique home loan experience, when your client walks away with that joy and excitement that's uncontainable, they are that much more likely to think about how you can help someone they hold close in the future, helping your business grow. But moving on, a little bit about Lori, your 2021 president. Lori has been a dedicated advocate and leader in the real estate industry for nearly 20 years. She is passionate about reforming the industry's image and elevating the level of professionalism with which brokerages operate. After her corporate career in both hospitality and as an executive and broker of record of one of the largest real estate brokerages in Orange County, she launched 2 businesses in the last 3 years. Namazi Real Estate Resources is a boutique business and consulting practice that provides guidance and solutions to the most innovative real estate entrepreneurs and brokers in the region. She is also the broker and partner, along with Lisa Dunn, of Laurel Real Estate Resources and Brokerage in Rancho Santa Margarita. She is the current OC Realtors President, is a CAR and NAR Director, and is co-founder of the rapidly growing Nerdy Real Estate and Deliberately Fair Housing Facebook groups. Please join me in welcoming Lori.
Good morning, and thank you, John. Thank you for that wonderful welcome. Good morning, Realtors and affiliates. Thank you for being with us today and for belonging to the largest local association of realtors in California. Founded in 1953, OCR has a great member value proposition and is affiliated both with the National Association of Realtors, the largest trade association in the country, and the California Association of Realtors, the largest state association in the US, as well as CRMLS, the largest MLS system in the country with close to 100,000 subscribers and participants. We are pleased to have both NAR and CAR presidents-elect speaking with us today, along with economist Dr. Robert Kleinhens. We know that you may have questions, so if you do, feel free to put them in the Q&A box. There will be a recording of today's presentation and slides will be available. Let's begin. I'm pleased to introduce our first speaker, Leslie Ruda-Smith. Leslie has been a realtor for 35 years and is the 2021 president-elect of the National Association of Realtors. Leslie is a broker associate at Dave Perry Miller Real Estate in Dallas, where she specializes in residential, ranch, and country real estate, along with her husband, Brian, and their 2 children, all of whom are realtors. She has had a successful career and has given back to the industry in so many ways. At the state level, Leslie was the 2016 chairman of the board of Texas Realtors, was named their 2018 Realtor of the Year. She has received the Texas Realtors Distinguished Service Award and founded the Texas State YPN Network. At the national level, Leslie has been a member of NAR's board of directors since 2009. She has served as the vice president for Region 10 and chaired numerous committees and advisory groups. Leslie, you've been a terrific friend and have visited us often here in Orange County. Thank you for being here today to give us an update from the National Association of Realtors.
Thank you, Lori, and hello, everyone. It's so nice to sort of kind of see you, but I really wish we were in person, and I'm thinking that might happen pretty soon. But after listening to Lori, I always thought everything was bigger in Texas, but I think it might just be in California. It's always great to join my friends from Orange County. Y'all are very special to me. I think the world of you, and you know, you have amazing staff, in case you didn't know that already, from Dave all the way through the entire association. I've had such great experiences. So thank you all so much for all of that. So one of these days we will be in person, but until then, I guess we're just going to keep Zooming. And, you know, it's kind of crazy to believe that we are 1/4 of the way through 2021. It still kind of feels like 2020 to me. I don't know about you, but I am happy to report that the realtors have a lot of advocacy wins that we have notched in the last year or so. So I'd like to start by telling you about some of them and to also share with you where we are headed from here. Congress passed another COVID relief package last week, which I'm sure you're all aware of. And I hope if you haven't applied for PPP, you will if you can. But that contained many priorities that were championed by NAR. So thanks to our lobby staff headed up by Shannon McGann in Washington, D.C. for the first time in the history of stimulus plans, independent contractors, that's us, we're part of it. So that's pretty awesome. Some of those things included a $21 billion additional rental assistance, more funding for small business loans, extended unemployment benefits and paid sick and family leave, new funding for housing counseling and a housing assistance fund, and more direct payments to Americans. The rental assistance funding in this relief package is in addition to the $25 billion that was allocated in December of 20. NAR has fought for many months to secure rental assistance for mom and pop property owners and American families who were in danger of going over the financial cliff. Over the past year, the realtors have also advocated for securing a full fiscal year extension of the National Flood Insurance Program, also known as NFIP. We just keep getting extensions. Someday we'll get there and we'll get something permanent. We've ensured independent contractors were eligible for unemployment for the first time ever. And we supported the PPP, or the Paycheck Protection Program corrections bill, to provide greater flexibility for small businesses. 1/5 of our members have reported using the PPP. So this support is really, really critical. In addition to COVID relief, we have a wide slate of realtor priorities that we are advocating for. First, we're focused on improving access to home ownership. Owning a home represents the American dream for more than 1 million families. It's also a cornerstone to economic security and long-term wealth building. NAR is also working on solutions to increase the new housing supply, tax incentives for home and property ownership, improved access to credit for all Americans, housing finance reform that preserves the 30-year mortgage, and protections to help Americans with student loan debt buy a home. Second, we must do all we can to enable an economic recovery after COVID-19. The residential real estate market is poised to help drive that recovery. But commercial lending has decreased significantly, and I'm sure you all are aware of that. We've already lost thousands of small businesses, and unfortunately, there are more at risk of closing. That's not good for business owners, consumers, or for us as realtors. Some of our proposals to enable a quick economic recovery include additional economic relief for realtors, their families, and consumers, ensuring federal rental assistance is operating well and that it is sufficiently funded, directing funds to help businesses keep workers on payroll and to meet their expenses, and protection for homeowners following the forbearance to help avoid losing their home. Third, NAR will work to ensure fair housing for all. In January 2020, we implemented the Fair Housing Act plan, which emphasizes accountability, culture change, and training. The plan seeks to ensure realtors are doing everything we possibly can to protect housing rights for all Americans. In November, we rolled out a new member training program. It's a simulation called Fairhaven. And you encounter realistic scenarios where discrimination could affect a transaction. If you haven't checked it out, I hope you will at nar.realtor. There are really powerful and emotional stories that allow you to see the harm that discrimination causes in people's lives. We've also released an implicit bias training video, which is very good, that you can also find at nar.realtor. The training offers practical tools to overcome hidden biases so that we treat all consumers fairly. And if you haven't gotten your At Home with Diversity, I highly recommend that you add that to the list and meet our President Charlie's challenge to accomplish all three of those. NAR is also pursuing a legislative agenda to help families of every color and in every community reach their American dream. And that includes policies to support equitable and accessible housing reform, increased funding and resources to fair housing enforcement, education, and housing discrimination testing, and amend the Fair Housing Act to bar discrimination based on sexual orientation or gender identity. Fourth, and finally, we must continue to build strong, resilient communities and businesses. This means fighting for the preservation of the 1031 like-kind exchanges and opportunity zones, reauthorization and reform of the National Flood Insurance Program, independent contractor status for all of us as real estate professionals, and infrastructure improvements such as broadband that are vital to building healthy and vibrant communities. Phew, 21 is going to be a big year. We got a lot on our plate, but no matter what comes our way, I can assure you that NAR will keep fighting for us in Washington, D.C., so that we can focus on our clients, our businesses, our communities, and our families. Speaking of our communities, they need us now more than ever, and realtors are answering the call. Did you know that 72% of realtors volunteer monthly? That's a lot of realtors when you think we have almost 1.5 million realtors. That's a lot of realtors working in our communities to make them better. And that's nearly double the rate of the general public. So kudos to realtors. This year, we're making the volunteerism initiatives one of our top priorities this year. So we're tracking volunteer hours and the hours that you volunteer in your community. So be sure to visit nar.realtor/RGN, as in Realtors Good Neighbors, to log your hours and to share your volunteer stories. It started in November and it goes through November of this year. So hopefully you'll get your volunteer hours in there to be counted. Our goal is to get over 5 million volunteer hours, and I have no doubt that we will be able to do that. So follow Realtors Are Good Neighbors on Facebook for ideas and to see uplifting stories about realtors doing good things across our country. Everyday realtors make an incredible impact, whether it's our clients in our communities or creating opportunities. NAR's new consumer advertising campaign is spreading our message far and wide. Hopefully, you've already seen some of the ads when you're watching your favorite television shows. This year's campaign, Opening the Doors to Opportunity, captures the amazing moment when a client finds the one, the property, the place that lets them realize their dreams, whether it's starting a business or starting a family, all thanks to their agent. And just to give you some context on how effective these campaigns can be, last year's campaign reached more than 2.9 billion total impressions. So we have many reasons to be optimistic about what's to come. America's housing industry greatly exceeded expectations in 2020, and I think that's for all of us. And NAR's chief economist, Lawrence Yun, predicts a robust growth this year. I think we are already seeing that. He expects new home sales to jump more than 20% and existing home sales to climb 15% this year, which is incredible. Considering the sales in 2020 reached their highest level since 2006, we're going to break that record from last year. The housing market continues to be a bright spot in the nation's economic recovery, and realtors are blazing trails for our country. But that's not surprising at all. We are community leaders. We are trusted advocates. We are the protectors and defenders of the American dream. After all, that is who we are. Let me close with a special thank you to your 2021 officers, your President, Lori Namazi, President-elect Adam Rodell, past President Danielle Corliss, and Treasurer Joyce Endo. And of course, your CEO, which I was practicing his last name, so let's give this a try. Dave Stefanidis. Let's see if that works. Or I could just call you Dave. Anyway, thank you all so much for your steady leadership. And to CAR President-elect and my good friend, Otto Katrina, it's always great to see you, and we look forward to hearing what you have to share with us today. I look forward to working side by side with each and every one of you as we get through another crazy year called 2021, but we are going to continue to do it together. Thank you all. Take care. Be safe. Back to you, Lori.
Thank you, Leslie, for that wonderful NAR update and for continuing to advance our industry in so many ways. It's such a delight to see you. I'm pleased to introduce our second speaker today, Otto Katrina. Otto is a broker and has been a realtor since 2002 and is our 2021 President-elect of the California Association of Realtors. In addition to serving his clients, Otto has an impressive record of service at all levels of organized real estate. He was 2011 president of the Bay East Association of Realtors and received numerous awards, including Realtor of the Year in 2007, a Distinguished Service Award in 2009, and the Outstanding Leadership Award in 2019. He also serves as a state director for both CAR and a national director for NAR, where he has served as a member and chairman for numerous committees. He is a member of NAR's President's Circle and was inducted into NAR's Hall of Fame for his generous contributions. I met Otto a few years ago, and I'm always inspired by his leadership. He is also a friend to OCR. Thank you for being here today to give us an update from the California Association of Realtors. Turn it over to you, Otto.
Lori, thank you very much, and congratulations to you and to your leadership team. And Leslie, I love you. I thank you for all that you do at NAR. Good morning, Orange County. I really look forward to the time today, although it is short, but I think if the opportunity to Zoom with you today, and I can't wait and look forward to where we can meet in person. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you in two parts, just give you a little brief of market conditions. My presentation will be a little bit below Dr. Roberts' presentation, but these are the statistics that I've got. I'd like to start by giving you a brief update on the state's housing market. As I'm sure you are aware of, the California housing market is very robust right now. 2020 was a very solid year, and 2021 looks to be even better. Since the housing sector represents approximately 1/5 of the state's GDP, this has been a great thing for expediting the recovery of California in spite of COVID. We have just gone through almost 10 consecutive months of month-over-month increases in sales statewide. Existing single-family home sales rose more than 22%. That's right, 22% in January alone. Our annualized pace to close sales in the state is projected to be our best year since 2012, somewhere north, of 435,000 closed sales. The market remains incredibly competitive with multiple offers on most properties. We're hearing 10, 20, 30% over asking. The median days on market was down to 11 days in January, which tells us how fast-paced the market is right now. Available unsold inventory is quite low, as you can imagine. This time last year in 2020, we had approximately 3 months of supply throughout the state. We are now down to 1.3 months to start 2021. Interest rates are projected to remain below 3% for most of the year. And because of the lack of inventory, prices are expected to grow 8% in 2021. This, of course, is great for any California seller, that exacerbates the affordable housing challenge of California even further. We now have a statewide affordability index of 27% compared to the national average of 59%. Many of the coastal communities in the teens and in the low 20% range. The only answer to slow this down and improve affordability is that we must figure out ways to create more housing supply. And last year was the first year that the population of California decreased, which implies that people are leaving our great state, and the high cost of housing is one of the main reasons. I want to go over a couple of things of what your leadership team has been doing over since the beginning of the year. The past 2 weeks, we've been meeting with California members of Congress and Senator Padilla. We've had conversations regarding the PPP loans, as Leslie had alluded to earlier, the recovery programs that were just passed last week that would benefit our brokers and our members. We talk about converting commercial rezoning, commercial buildings and vacant malls to residential zoning, the potential for elimination or modification of 1031 exchanges, making our elected officials aware of the affordability and lack of availability of product, first-time home buyer tax credits, our initiative at CAR taking the lead. And Lori, thank you for you and your group on Fair Housing Initiative, the Pathway Project that was approved by the Los Angeles City Council overwhelmingly, and then also FHA reduction in premiums, GSCs as a utility, and the elimination of risk-based pricing. A couple of events that I'd like to mention to you coming up with our meetings is a tech summit on April 14th from 9 to 4. You can go to car.org and sign up for that. And then also I wanted to bring everybody in the loop. We have a couple of new committees. We have a Fair Housing Policy Committee. We have a new Diversity Committee. And then also we have a Fair Housing and Diversity Forum. And we are working on those right now with the different task forces. I guess with that pretty well concludes what I have to say. I just want to let you know that Dave, our president, Jennifer, our treasurer, and also who runs SPF, over the next 2 days, we've got 2 full days of strategic planning meetings. Your leadership team is working literally throughout the week, and there's no 7 to 5 with the leadership team at CAR. It's a lot more busier than I thought when I took on the responsibility. I'm excited for the challenge. I'm proud to be part of the team. Joel is just a remarkable individual as the CEO for CAR. And I want to continue the relationship with Orange County. You guys have been real close. We've had a great relationship. I want to increase that dialogue, be transparent with you. I did put my email and I did put my phone number out to the chats box. If you have any questions, I'm more than happy to answer them. Get a hold of Lori, get a hold of Dave, Zippy, and I'll be more than happy to take those questions. And I've also put my phone number in there also. So with that, I'll turn it back over to you, Lori. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Otto, for that informative update and for all of the wonderful things that you and our CAR leadership is doing for us and for our industry. Thank you. We're so appreciative of both Leslie and Otto for their time today to provide us an update from the state and national levels. And now I would like to share the update from the local level. From licensing to training to store items, networking, and a recognizable brand name in the community, Orange County Realtors provides a number of core services as we strive to make our members as successful as they can be. Our menu of services and programs are guided by these principles: leadership, education, advocacy, service, and engagement. And it's these last two that I want to highlight: service and engagement. Because we live in a digitally driven world where the full value of human connection is often traded for transactional proficiency, it's refreshing to be a part of an association of friendly staff, great customer care, hands-on training, and plenty of people willing to mentor and assist you, whether you're brand new or celebrating 50 years of membership. In fact, joining us today are Keith Snyder and Robert Conrad, both celebrating 50 years of Realtor membership. Congratulations, and thank you for your loyalty and contributions to our real estate profession. In addition to our long-term members like Keith and Robert, no one better exemplifies the caring spirit that is our hallmark than our most recent Leadership Legacy Award recipients, Sandra Deering, Mary Eileen Matthias, and Nancy Hunt, who sadly passed away last May. We also recognize several others for their service to Orange County Realtors, as shown on the slide. Congratulations to all of these recipients for their exceptional contributions to our industry and to our association. So if you know someone who wants to belong to an association with superstars like these, who is looking for outstanding service, top-tier speakers and training, tech tools and applications, as well as an array of marketing meetings with the most active and successful agents in the area, then invite them to join the largest and the best association, the Orange County Realtors. I also want to thank you for your membership. We're ultimately an association made of people, some truly remarkable realtors and amazing affiliates who strive every day to serve their clients, homeowners, families and friends, and the community at large. The year 2020 is behind us. Unforgettable perhaps, with too many stories of loss, even among our own realtor family. While behind the scenes, 2020 President Danielle Corliss, with her board of directors, were making critical business decisions and setting new policy to keep members and staff safe, but also to give members uninterrupted access to the membership benefits. Although the physical office was not open, measures were taken to introduce new live chat and enhanced phone service, exterior locker banks were installed, plexiglass partitions too, along with new sanitary cleaning protocols. Training took the form of online classes and webinars, and more digital transaction tools were added. A series of legal seminars provided guidance on how to comply with the state and county health orders. In all, we offered nearly 800 educational opportunities for our members. We even continued our professional standards program by adopting policy allowing for virtual hearings and conducted 50 such cases online. The association delivered uninterrupted service that exceeded expectations and made for a wonderful membership experience. The directors did this with one objective in mind: keep our members fully operational during a global pandemic when, oddly enough, the real estate market took off. But it was not business as usual, as realtors labored under a whole new set of health restrictions and rules that continue to this day. Beyond the day-to-day business of running the association, Danielle sensed members were struggling, and that the ideal of home as the center of family and community life was fading, as we all bore witness to social unrest and violence in the streets. And for the first time, realtors faced their own past, a past that included discriminatory practices which divided communities by race and denied some Americans the chance to realize the dream of homeownership. I also want to mention that this year, your education committee has put together several programs to raise awareness for cultural and social issues, including offering the NAR's accredited class that Leslie mentioned, At Home with Diversity, once a quarter, along with a thought-provoking course on implicit bias and a full week of training on fair housing and equal opportunity. Check the website or the magazine for dates and registration information. Please watch with me now as President Danielle and the 2020 Board of Directors offer their award-winning message of hope.
Home is a simple word with a complex meaning.
Home is the place in which we receive initial nurture,
From where we go to make our way in the world and to which we return.
in person or in thought, for shelter, warmth, and comfort.
Home has taken on a new meaning.
Home is not only a shelter, but also a classroom,
an office, a meeting room, and a gym.
Home is a sanctuary, a haven, a safe place to weather this storm.
Home is the setting for new experiences, new hobbies, and new passions.
Home is a place of familiarity where we can laugh, celebrate, and be ourselves.
While enjoying the comfort of home, we're also feeling the power of community.
Coming together to discover new ways
to practice the essential business of real estate.
We are mastering virtual communications
to foster new and existing relationships.
We are donning masks, adapting to new protocols,
and evolving with this new virtual environment.
We are not only selling houses, we are improving
and growing our communities, reinventing ourselves and our businesses.
We are committed to working together to
preserve the American dream of homeownership.
That is why we will mask up, glove up, and show up
to fulfill our primary mission of bringing people home.
Inspiring video. I enjoy watching it so many times. And now I'd like to turn the program over to our treasurer, Joyce Endo.
Thank you. Thank you, President Laurie. Good morning, fellow realtors and affiliate members. I am pleased to report that your association is fiscally sound and is compliant with an audit and reserve requirements. Let's start by talking about the balance sheet as of December 31st, 2020. Net assets are $10,121,000. They include over $9.5 million in cash on hand and $600,000 in fixed assets, including the members' headquarters office in Laguna Hills, which is owned free and clear. Each year, the Association Directors and Finance Committee, which I am honored to chair as treasurer, manages approximately $10 million in revenue collected from dues, MLS-related activities, our stores, realized and unrealized investment income, and through revenue sharing opportunities. Concerning liabilities, our 2020 balance sheet shows $3.3 million in dues and MLS fees prepaid for 2021 and $320,000 in amounts due to CAR and NAR. We have $5.5 million in cash reserves. This represents a healthy 7 months of operating expenses. Under the oversight of the Finance Committee and in consultation with our investment advisor, $3.5 million of the cash reserve balance is put to work through a conservatively managed Morgan Stanley investment account. Now, I would like to address some commonly asked questions. Does the association go through an annual audit or a review? Yes, and we passed with flying colors again for the audited year 2019. A review will be conducted by our CPA firm for both 2020 and 2021, while another full audit will be conducted for the 2022 financials. This 3-year audit cycle ensures that we are compliant with the National Association of Realtors requirements. Who has oversight responsibility over the association spending? That is the responsibility of the Finance Committee and me as your elected treasurer. At regular intervals throughout the year, we review actual spending and revenue performance against the budget. We supervise adherence to budget and appropriate allocation of resources to offer the best programs and services. In unanticipated situations, the Finance Committee is the responsible body to review adjustments in spending and make the recommendations to the Board of Directors. Of note,
Due to the COVID-19 travel and meeting restrictions, we spent less on those activities, while we invested more in technology to equip staff for remote operations, thus ensuring the continuity of service to our members. And while it's not a RACI project, we paid a waterproof our building roof. And what about OCAR Cares, the Realtor Action Fund, and the Housing Affordability Fund? Our realtors continue to donate generously to these important funds. Our realtors, and especially our affiliates, donated $39,205 to OCAR Cares, which provide financial relief to members hurt by sudden accident, illness, or family loss. The OCAR Cares balance is now $399,675. And as a result, your directors approved an increase to the maximum benefits up to $4,000 from $3,000, and for catastrophic events up from $10,000, up from $6,000 to $10,000. For our all-important political action funds, your Realtor Action Fund, or RAF, members contributed almost $169,000 during the renewal period, easily meeting the state association 20% minimum membership participation requirement. The last fund supported by members is CAR's Housing Affordability Fund, or HAF, which local associations may draw upon to support local housing and community development programs. In the past, OCR has been a recipient. Through the dues checkoff, members contributed $17,000 in 2020. Finally, although CAR has reportedly forecasted a decline in realtor membership, our association continues to add primary members. However, our affiliate members has been understandably hit hard by the pandemic and suffered a 24% decline in membership. Otherwise, in 2020, our primary realtor membership grew 1.84% and ended with 14,054 primary realtor members. Madam President, that concludes my report.
Thank you, Madam Treasurer Joyce, for that very informative report. I do want to just give a quick correction on the OCAR Cares balance. What you saw on the screen was correct, $199,675. It was stated in error by Joyce, but the actual balance is $199,675. Thank you, Joyce, for a wonderful job. All the numbers blend together. I would have done the same thing. So finally, I want to highlight both OCAR Cares and more recently, our Realtor and Affiliate Wellness, or RAW group. Through their generosity, realtors and affiliates have shown incredible compassion for one another through their generous donations to OCAR Cares. Please note that if you are a member and meet a few simple requirements, then you are eligible to apply for OCAR Cares. The application process is entirely confidential. Though the association hosts the RAW group, the meetings are private and also confidential, and they are run entirely by the attendees themselves. Any member of OCR may attend if they need mental or emotional support. Lastly, to all our volunteers, those who give their time, talent, and treasure to the association as committee members, board members, and facilitators, and of course, our fantastic YPN committee, whose members were awarded both state and national Chapter of the Year honors. Thank you for routinely joining forces to take part in campaigns with our industry and community partners to serve in so many amazing ways. Members of Orange County Realtors, this concludes my report. So we would like to welcome you all back to the Orange County Realtors Annual Membership Meeting and Economic Forecast. It is my pleasure to introduce our final speaker. Dr. Robert Kleinhans brings over 30 years of experience in public speaking, economic studies, and policy analysis. and previously served as Deputy Chief Economist with our very own California Association of Realtors. Dr. Klein-Hens holds a PhD and MA in economics from the University of Southern California and a BA in economics from the University of Michigan. He is a frequent contributor to CNBC, Bloomberg, NPR, and KNX Radio, as well as the Wall Street Journal and the LA Times. Dr. Klein-Hens has provided his economic expertise in various capacities for Beacon Economics, the Los Angeles County Economic Development Corporation, and is currently on the faculty at Cal State Long Beach, having previously taught at USC, UC Riverside, and Cal State Fullerton. Today, he is founder and principal economist of the firm Klein-Hens Economics, which specializes in the economics of cities and regions. We welcome your questions, so please feel free to post them in the Q&A section, and we will answer them either during the presentation or at the end prior to concluding our meeting. Welcome, Dr. Klein-Hens. We're looking forward to your presentation.
Thanks, everybody. Good morning. It's my great pleasure to be here today to talk to OC Realtors. As you've heard, I'm sort of a former member of the Realtor family, having worked at CAR as the Deputy Chief Economist for 11 years, working closely with Leslie Appleton Young. Had the good fortune to meet many of you during those years in which I was working, traveling up and down the state, talking about the economy and the housing market. I had the good fortune of getting to know Otto before he became the esteemed president-elect. So congratulations to Otto. But I'm here today to talk about the outlook for Orange County, both the economy and the housing market in 2021, and maybe even a peek out to 2022. You heard what Otto had to say about the CAR outlook, which I think is a fairly optimistic outlook for the housing market in 2021. We do have a lot of things going for us, though, even as we dig ourselves out of the pandemic disruption that has brought so many problems to the economy and, of course, has caused so much human pain. So let's take a look at what we have in store today. I will talk about the US economy for a short while, because so much of what's happening in terms of policy and the overall performance of the economy is playing out on the national stage. Of course, we in California have our own version of that story because of the nature in which we've reopened our economy in the face of the pandemic. So we'll talk a little bit about that. But then we drill down to Orange County, its economy, its dynamism, the outlook for the next several years, before we turn to your sector, our sector, the housing market, how things are going there. We'll wrap up with a couple of other topics before finishing and taking some questions. So I'm genuinely looking forward to sharing this with you. It was about a year ago, it was March 12th of 2020 when I gave my last in-person presentation. And I was just looking at those slides the other day because I gave a talk virtually, of course, to the very same group just on Wednesday of this past week. A year ago, we really thought that this was going to be something that we experienced in the first half of 2020, that is to say the pandemic and the shutdown. We would get through it. We would reopen the economy in the second half of 2020 and then move forward. It was kind of like pushing the pause button on the economy. Well, it's been anything but that. But I have to tell you that here in 2021, as we're finishing out the first quarter and moving into the second quarter, there are a lot of good details that are falling into place about how the economy is likely to perform in the year ahead. So let's take a look at what's happening now. The unemployment rate, of course, in the US shot up last year. You got to remember, a year ago, just before the shutdown, we were in record territory as far as the economy is concerned. We had a record long expansion at the national level. We had an unemployment rate nationally that was at 3.5%, the lowest in 50 years. And in the span of just a couple months, the unemployment rate skyrocketed from 3.5% to 14.4% nationally. And you can see as well how the job counts just plunged from over 152 million nationally to 130 million by April of last year. Not long after that, we began the slow but steady recovery that occurred in the second and third quarters of last year. And then with a series of lockdowns, shutdowns, and so on going across the country, we saw that job growth kind of plateaued in the latter portion of 2020. But we expect that as we move forward into 2021, especially in the second half, things are going to accelerate. We all have this desire to resume activity. Yet at the same time, we need to contain the virus. If you take a look at the entire economy and the segments of the economy that have been hardest hit, they include leisure and hospitality, like restaurants, hotels, and the like, certain retail outlets, other services like salons. We all know this because it took forever for us to get our hair cut and so on several months ago. Each of those is reopening at this point in time, but full recovery is really going to require that each of these sectors of the economy are fully back on their feet. Now, you can see right now the unemployment rate for the nation is at 6%. If we put every restaurant worker back to work tomorrow nationally, the unemployment rate nationally would fall to 4%. So by far the hardest hit sector of the economy is the restaurant industry, which is a part of leisure and hospitality, as you can see. So we are moving forward. In 2020, ending the record long expansion, we had a 3.5% contraction in GDP. GDP is the basic heartbeat of the economy. So we're looking at the labor market as we just did. We're looking at GDP and we're looking at inflation. These are the vital signs of the US economy. And certainly they've each taken a hit over the past year. But it's important to realize a couple of things. Number one, this was a pandemic. It wasn't a typical cyclical downturn, which is what we call a recession. And number two, as you'll see over here on the right-hand side, we took our hits in the first and second quarter of last year, but we actually began recovery in the second half of 2021. So we bottomed out in the second quarter. We've actually been adding to GDP in the latter portion of 2020, and we expect in this first quarter, which will end March 31st, the GDP is likely to increase by approximately 8%. So we're already on the road to recovery. It's just that we're not fully recovered, and that's going to take some time. It's a good idea to compare where we were as of the end of last year with recent history as well as some distant history. Now, we all know about the Great Depression, 4 successive years of big hits to GDP, as you can see here. The most recent year when we had a steep decline in GDP was back in 1946 when GDP fell by 11.6%. Well, during the pandemic disruption, GDP fell by 3.5%. So that's more than we faced during the Great Recession, but nothing compared to some of these past downturns. And keep in mind that 3.5% really all occurred in the first half of last year. We're currently in a recovery mode, which is important to keep in mind. Not that everything is rosy by any means. We've got a long ways to go, you'll see. But certain measures of the economic performance are going to tell us that we're going to be mainly recovered by the end of this year, while other measures are going to tell us that certain parts of the economy are going to take some time to recover. What you're looking at here is personal income across the United States. That's the black line. That big spike that you see there corresponds to those $1,200 checks that rolled out in the middle of last year. Meanwhile, the consumer expenditures on the part of the consumer sector of the economy is what you see in that green line. 2/3 of the economy comes from consumer spending. So as the consumer sector goes, so goes the overall economy. And what you can see there is that consumers pulled back in the first part of last year as they were trying to figure out which end was up. But then they resumed their expenditures as we moved toward the fourth quarter of last year. We're still a ways away from that dotted line, which represents the trend that we had leading up to the pandemic. But the hope is that in 2021, we're going to close that gap. Now, there were concerns during the latter part of last year that the recovery was slowing down, if not fizzling out. And certainly you can see on the right-hand side, the consumer spending did slow down as we ran through to the end of last year. But as I said a moment ago, GDP is expected to grow quite sharply by over 8% in this first quarter of the year. And for all of this year, we're looking at somewhere in the neighborhood of 4 to 6% growth in GDP. So GDP is really expected to be the leader in showing recovery for the rest of the economy. And part of the reason that we think that the economy is going to be stronger in 2021 compared to 2020 is that the consumer sector, 2/3 of the economy, is well positioned to grow. Consumers pulled back on their use of loans and credit cards during the pandemic throughout most of last year. And meanwhile, because of the strength of the housing market, we've seen homeowners' equity continue to increase. So in terms of the balance sheet that the consumer sector has at the present time, it's in good shape. So that's very important as we look ahead. And it's worth thinking about how this is a set of circumstances that's different from what we saw back during the Great Recession and the financial meltdown. Back then, we had a lot of people who bought homes that they really could not afford, and those homes went into foreclosure, and that caused home prices to tumble across the nation, across here in Southern California. That's not happened this time around. And importantly, large numbers of people have been able to hang on to their jobs through this pandemic disruption and continue to contribute to economic growth. And so we're much better positioned, even with the damage that's been done to the labor market. We're much better positioned right now to recover over the next couple of years than we were at the point of the Great Recession, which not only was an economic downturn, but also a huge financial crisis. So there are other sectors of the economy that we pay attention to: business investment spending, international trade, and government spending. That's what you're looking at here on the screen right now. Business spending certainly was expected to fall last year as a lot of uncertainty arose during the early months of the pandemic. But during the second half of last year, it came back fairly sharply. You can see that in the third quarter of last year, we saw an annualized year-over-year growth rate, or quarter-to-quarter growth rate, of nearly 90% over the plunge the prior quarter. So business investment spending is poised to improve. And with the low interest rate environment that we have right now, that's almost assuredly baked in the cake. International trade is turning around. You probably heard that the ports of Long Beach and Los Angeles both had record years last year. More recently, we heard that February was a record month for the port of Long Beach. People have a lot of pent-up demand. They have been buying goods, but they want more, and they've not been able to buy services. In fact, if you compare purchases of goods and purchases of services with each other, goods purchases nationally have gone up by about 6%, and purchases of services, which would include things like hotels, restaurants, vacations and the like, hairstyling and things like that, down 7%. So indeed, that's exactly what we expect given what we've been seeing in the headlines. Meanwhile, we've got government spending. We're looking at trillion-dollar deficits over the next several years, partly due to the pandemic relief and stimulus that we've seen come through over the past year. Now, I just want to share with you what pent-up demand looks like. This is a scene from the ports of Los Angeles and Long Beach from a few days ago. And if you take a look, you can see not only the cruise line ships, but in the distance, you can see several container ships that are either waiting to unload. In some cases, they might be quarantined. But the main point here is that it's very rare to see this many ships all stacked up on the ocean, waiting for some activity at the local ports. The local ports, of course, being the largest ports in the Western Hemisphere. So this is what pent-up demand looks like. We'll see many of the things that are sitting in these containers wind up on our shelves in the coming weeks and months. So I also talked about the deficit, the federal deficit. So that was spawned we already had trillion-dollar deficits leading into the pandemic, but the upshot of fiscal policy relief to households, businesses, and others was that the sum total of the three expenditure bills starting last March and running up through the most recent one is equivalent to about 30 or 40% of GDP. Now, yes, that's a lot of spending, but it's an important financial backstop to both households and to businesses to get them through the pandemic until we finally get ourselves fully back on track with economic growth. So we learned a lesson back at the time of the Great Recession. The aid at that time was about $800 billion. It was viewed as not enough at the time. So the fact that we've been able to push through these pandemic bills over the last year, it certainly is going to cushion the blow that the pandemic disruption has caused to the economy, to households, to businesses, and especially to small businesses. Meanwhile, the Fed's not been sitting on its hands. It pushed its key interest rate, the Fed funds rate, to zero. It's been buying long bonds and mortgage-backed securities to keep the long end of the yield curve low. But what we're finding as we've been paying attention to the news over the last couple of weeks is that the Fed really doesn't have control over the financial markets. Its ability to control financial markets, that's kind of a thing of the past. Now it can influence market rates, but it sometimes gets pushback from the markets themselves, and that's kind of what we're seeing right now. So the Fed has a meeting this week. We'll be interested to see if it plans to make any changes to its key policy rates or to its long-term long bond buying strategy. I am inclined to think that it's just going to stick with the current plan for the time being until we see greater improvement in the economy. But all of this, again, has helped businesses and households to weather the storm that is this pandemic. This is a quick look at the $1 trillion deficits. And again, as I said, this was kind of baked in the cake before we even had the pandemic. The 2021 bar that you see there, second from the left, is undoubtedly going to push past $2.5 trillion this year, maybe higher. But then we're going to see things come back down to earth. That is to say, instead of $2 and $3 trillion deficits, we'll have $1 trillion deficits as the economy gets onto a more solid footing in the coming years. It would be ideal if the Congress would see fit to start to wind down some portion of this deficit so that the debt service over the long run is not as damaging to the overall budget of the economy, or I should say of the federal government. But that is definitely something we need to deal with in future years, not here in 2021. So yet another indicator of welfare or how well the economy is doing is inflation. And so you've been reading in the news about inflation, maybe the thought that inflation is going to escalate. And yeah, it's expected that inflation is going to go up some over the next couple of months, but that's mainly a reflection of heightened economic activity. When the economy shut down, we had two things happen. We had a slowdown on the supply side as the supply chain, if you will, was brought to a halt in many ways. And at the same time, we saw a decline in the demand for goods and services. That demand for goods and services is what we expect to get going in the coming months. And so that's going to push prices up somewhat, but really we're not expecting any sort of breakaway inflation. I mean, 2 to 2.5%, which is kind of what the Fed would like to see in the overall economy. I like to draw the analogy between inflation and blood pressure. If you don't have inflation, it's sort of like not having blood pressure. But that is to say, inflation, low inflation though, just like low blood pressure, is one sign of health in the economy. So we're not expecting inflation to get out of hand, but we do expect to see a little bit more than we've seen in recent years as we go through 2021. Now, that's part of the reason that we expect to see interest rates go up from record lows over the coming months. But another reason that is often overlooked is just the sheer fact that the economy is expected to do better in 2021 and 2022 than it did in 2020 during the worst days of the pandemic. So higher mortgage rates, higher interest rates, partly are a response to the threat or expectation of inflation, but they're also indicative of the expectation that the economy is going to be doing better. And so both of those are going to be in play as we go through 2021. But, you know, mortgage rates, which are still at record lows by just about any historic measure, even as they inch up this year, are still going to be very low by historic standards. Now, it's hard to imagine that this is an economic downturn when the stock market has performed as it has over the last several months. This shows the performance of the S&P 500 dating back to the beginning of last year. But keep in mind, with rock bottom interest rates, fixed return assets were generating virtually no return. And there was a lot of liquidity, both in the US economy and globally. So a lot of that liquidity was unleashed on the stock market and gave rise to new highs. Of course, the pandemic relief, the actions on the part of the Fed, and even individual industries such as Google, Facebook, Apple, so many tech sector companies, Amazon.com. Many of these big companies have done well during the pandemic, and a lot of that is reflected in the performance of the various stock indexes. So yeah, it's kind of odd to see the stock market doing as well as it's done, but this is not your typical recession. And so what we're seeing play out, as you know, with the housing market, is that certain parts of the economy do well, just as other parts of the economy don't do well. So the outlook nationally at this stage is that the pandemic has had a significant impact on both households and businesses, especially small businesses. But the acceleration in activity that we anticipate is going to be fairly strong here in 2021, especially in the second half of the year, as more people get vaccinated. And that vaccination is going to reduce the amount of uncertainty surrounding how the economy is going to perform in the coming weeks and coming months. Now, the news covers or talks about the shape of the recovery. You probably heard early on that the economy was going to come back just as strongly as it contracted. That is to say, many people thought that a V-shaped recovery was in the cards. Well, the fact of the matter is that both businesses and people, after they've taken a hit of any magnitude, are going to proceed initially with a certain amount of caution. If you take a look at previous economic cycles, either mild economic downturns or severe downturns, in each case, the recovery in the aftermath, the next several months, is generally at a fairly subdued pace. It takes a little while for that pace to accelerate. And then finally, 2 or 3 years out, we see real job growth and a real pickup in economic activity. That's kind of what we see for 2021. We see GDP up by mid-single digits. We see the unemployment rate and overall job counts recovering probably in 2022 or 2023. And individual industries are going to behave differently. The face-to-face industries will take longer to recover. We've got a number of industries that have thrived during the downturn, going online, workers being able to operate remotely. Some of that is going to stick, but I don't think as much is going to stick as many futurists would say. The bottom line is that we're looking at an economy that's in recovery mode, and this year should shape up to be a good year of recovery. This gives you a sense of how long it takes for the economy to fully recover, at least the labor market. So the labor market always lags GDP in recovery. And so you're looking at the unemployment rate in the recent 4 cycles, including the present one. And what you see here is that 5 years out, the unemployment rate might get back to where it was before the downturn, or I should say in the pre-downturn era. What I've drawn for you with that dashed line is the likely trajectory of the unemployment rate, that's the national unemployment rate, which would get to 4% in somewhere in the neighborhood of 4 or 5 years out. It takes time for the labor market to fully recover. Not to say that jobs are not going to be growing over that period of time. We expect to see job growth throughout the next several years. It's just that it's going to take time for us to fully recoup the jobs that were lost during the pandemic. As an illustration, if you take a look at the purple line that shows there, that's the trajectory that occurred after the Great Recession. It took a full 6 years for our economy to fully recover the jobs that were lost during the Great Recession. But I'm willing to bet that long before that point in time, you were already experiencing better housing market conditions. You were also experiencing better financial circumstances for your business. So even as some of these sectors take a while, or these indicators take a while to fully recover, we individually are going to experience recovery in our own circumstances. This is just a shout out to you, to me, to everybody out there who has figured out a way to move forward over the last year. Okay, we indeed have been quite resilient. We used to have in-person meetings galore, now we have Zoom meetings, okay? Like it or not, that's where we are right now. Similarly, for business trips and getting together with loved ones, which hasn't been in the cards in recent months, we've found other ways to engage in those activities, whether it's through virtual or in-person travel by ground. You can just take a look at this list. You know, I was an occasional Netflix user prior to the pandemic, and my wife and I have become quite regular at watching Netflix several nights a week. And you know, how many of you are using Grubhub? How many of you have begun to shop on Amazon in ways that you never did before? Telemedicine visits. This was something that I remember doing a couple of years ago, but it was very novel. And today, just about every physician that our family members are talking to offers that as an option. And I was probably one of the last people to buy a printer as the pandemic was taking hold, which seemed almost archaic given how we're moving increasingly to the use of electronic documents, digital signatures, and the like. A lot of this is going to stick after we get back to normal, but you know, there's no substitute for face-to-face meetings, for all the interaction that occurs in those settings, the networking, for example, that would have occurred in the course of this annual meeting that we're hosting right now, we're participating in right now. Some of that networking can take place through chat and so on. Oftentimes it takes place after this event. But the fact of the matter is that it's so much richer when we get a chance to see each other face to face. So let's take a look next at the California economy. Well, like the US, the California economy was in record territory leading up to the pandemic. It had an unemployment rate of just over 4%, which put it in record low territory based on records going back to the mid-1970s. The California economy was really flying high over the period of time from about 2012 to 2019. Even though it accounted for somewhere in the neighborhood of 12% of the national job base, it was contributing about 16% of the new job growth that was taking place in the US economy. So, you know, the California economy was anything but stagnant. It was anything but, you know, lagging under the weight of whatever regulations and taxes and things like that. It was leading the economy, leading the national economy in terms of so much economic growth. Then we had the pandemic, and we saw the unemployment rate quadruple practically overnight from just around 4% in the first 2 months of last year to 16%. Excuse me. Now we've seen it come down in the months since. It's currently at 9% as of January, based on data that we just saw come out on Friday of this past week. Like the US, it's the face-to-face industries that have been very hard hit. But in addition, California has been harder hit, as is evidenced by the higher unemployment rate, for a couple of reasons. Number one, those face-to-face industries, especially the tourism sector, has a somewhat higher concentration here in California compared to the US as a whole. And of course, you know that that's even more so the case with Orange County's economy as a hub, as a real destination for so many tourists from around, not just around the US, but around the world. So California was hit harder in part because of its mix of jobs or mix of industries, and also because of the strategy that it's adopted to deal with the pandemic and reopen the economy at a slower pace than other parts of the country. Still, other parts of the country took their hits. And so while California continues to have a high unemployment rate at 9%, a couple of other states have high unemployment rates as well. In general, these are the states that also have a higher concentration of these hardest hit industries. And even some of the states that we hear are doing much better continue to have stubbornly high unemployment rates. So it's important to at least take stock of the damage that was done before we move on to talk about how things are going to look in the future. And so in the case of California, 15 years of job gains were wiped out in 2 months' time. And to me, that's just staggering to have an event. Remember, it's not an economic cycle, it's an event, a one-time event that caused job counts to plunge. We lost 2.6 million jobs or 2.7 million jobs in the span of 2 months. We have begun the recovery of those jobs, as you can see over here on the right-hand side, but we have a ways to go before we fully recover. Now, this table is a table that only economists can love, so I apologize in advance if you're not a numbers person. But we can begin by looking at the top here, and we can observe that thus far of the jobs that were lost in that shutdown period last year, only about 1/3 have been recovered across the state. Looking across the top, we had 17.7 million jobs in the US economy in February of last year. We lost 2.7 million jobs in that 2-month time period, down 15%. We've only recovered a little over 900,000 jobs thus far. Now, by comparison, whereas California has recovered 34% of its jobs, the US overall has recovered about 56%. Okay, so that's a good benchmark against which to gauge progress in the California economy. I expect over these next several months that this gap is going to close. It's going to close fairly quickly as parts of the economy fully get back on their feet. But look at the damage that was done to some of these key sectors. Leisure and hospitality lost nearly 1 million jobs, accounting for a large share of the job losses that were incurred back there in March and April of last year. And it's only recovered about 19% of those jobs thus far. Retail, trade, healthcare, other services, which includes nails and hair and childcare centers and things like that, also very hard hit given the nature of those activities. Administrative and support services, including building maintenance and related kinds of services, no surprise to see that was hard hit as well. The industries that appear in yellow in this recovered column generally have the longest recovery path ahead of them. So you can just scan that very quickly. Note that government actually continued to lose jobs even after the pandemic shutdown back in the first half of last year was ended. But also take note of the fact that at least a couple of sectors are fairly close to recovering the jobs that were lost during the pandemic shutdown. And in particular, transportation and warehousing actually has seen its job count surpass the pre-pandemic job count. It's now 3% above where it was back in February of this year. So as I said earlier, with respect to the national outlook, there was concern that the recovery was losing steam as we wound 2020 down and entered 2021. And certainly there's merit to that concern. This shows job gains for the nation and for the US, for the state of California, month by month throughout last year. And you can see that things really ground to a halt as we entered December of last year. And even the January numbers aren't great right now, but there are a few areas where we see that things are picking up. So you heard about the K shape of this recovery. Some people are doing well while others are doing poorly. This is evidence of that K-shaped recovery. People making more than $60,000 a year have fully regained their jobs and then some, with jobs in that wage category up 1.1% compared to January of 2020. But the other two categories here, below $60,000, the middle wage and the low wage, these individuals continue to suffer from job losses. So the middle wage category is down about 7% compared to January of last year. But the low wage category, which, as you can imagine, includes people at restaurants and bars, it includes people at nail salons and many of these other hard industries, the job counts are still 29% lower than they were back in January of last year. So, as I say, some parts of the economy are resuming activity and showing some strength, while others have a long road to go. If we take a look across the state, you can see that unemployment rates vary quite widely. We have a lot of double-digit unemployment rates around the state, but what's noteworthy is that if we were to look at this over time, it turns out that in contrast to what's happened to other economic downturns, we actually see things getting better in the inland part of California. So here locally, it would be like the Inland Empire, getting better faster than in coastal parts of Southern California and the rest of the state. So the unemployment rates are coming down. It's just that it's taking time. They're just not coming down fast enough. A quick look at jobs and the jobs recovered by large metropolitan areas across the state. You can zoom in here to Orange County. This shows that about 27% of the jobs in Orange County that were lost during the shutdown have been recovered so far. So it has a long ways to go with the reopening of Disney, which we just heard about, Disney and California Adventure, Knott's Berry Farm, so many of these attractions and their associated activities with hotels, restaurants, and the like. I would expect to see this grow, this 27% grow quite sharply in the coming months. So I'm fairly optimistic about how Orange County is going to recover in the next several months. So speaking of Orange County, boy, took a huge hit in the first part of the year, just as the state and nation did, with an unemployment rate that shot up from under 3%. So we were under 3% unemployment in Orange County prior to the pandemic, up to 15%, 14.9% in the month of June 2020. So we're now down. We've actually cut the unemployment rate by about half at 7.4%. Sorry about the scale here. I'm not sure what's happening. But as of January, the unemployment rate in Orange County was at 7.4%. As you would imagine, many of the same industries I've spoken of are the very same industries that have contributed to that heightened unemployment rate earlier this year. And as they've recovered, we've seen the unemployment rate come down. But it was a big hit. I mean, the total wage and salary jobs in Orange County basically rolled back to where they were back in 2012. Not as bad as the 15-year rollback at the state level, but a huge hit in what is arguably one of the most dynamic and resilient and diverse economies that we have here in Southern California. So the economy, as you can see, has begun to recover those lost jobs, but it does have a ways to go. Yet another one of those tables that breaks down where we stand right now, what ground must be made up. And so we've got about 1.7 million jobs in Orange County, or we did back in February of last year, having lost about 275,000 jobs during the shutdown. And by the way, the job losses bottomed out in Orange County in May, not in April, the way they did in California and other parts of the state. But it lost 16% of its jobs. As of January of this year, has only recovered less than 1/4 of those job losses. Here's the shortfall right now, 209,000 jobs that it still has to recover. Now, leisure and hospitality accounted for somewhere in the neighborhood of 40% of those job losses. So we welcome the reopening of Disney and so many of the other attractions in Orange County. And, you know, it's not just those highly visible attractions that contribute to the hospitality and tourism component of the local economy, but you've got any number of other resorts up and down the coast that are also a huge attraction. People with discretionary income who come and enjoy their time here. They soak up the sunshine, they take in the attractions, and they also make significant contributions to the local economy. So we're welcoming the recovery of that sector of the economy in the next several months, but it will take time for us to see full recovery. Some of the other sectors that were hard hit, other services I alluded to earlier, private education services, and I mean, mining and logging doesn't employ a lot of people, but the miners and the loggers would be upset if I didn't mention that they lost 25% of their jobs. We've got a number of sectors in the economy that still, you know, have a long ways to go before they fully recover. But we are seeing at least a couple of sectors in the local economy that are actually doing better than they were at the tail end or just before the pandemic hit. So it's a mixed bag for the Orange County economy at the present time. Several of the sectors have huge year-over-year job losses compared to January of last year. Overall, we've seen that job counts are down about 12% compared to January of last year. But transportation, finance and insurance, and utilities are up. And as we move through the next several months, we'll begin to see, especially as we get into the second half of this year, we're going to begin to see year-over-year job gains that point to not just a recovery, but a big recovery in 2021. Now let's take a step back and look a little bit further ahead as we look at how the Orange County economy is going to perform in not just in 2021 and 2022, but beyond those next couple of years. Over on the left-hand side, what you see is that Orange County, represented here in orange, of course, has had negligible population growth in recent years. And what that has meant is that other counties, other adjacent counties, including Riverside and San Bernardino County, have actually grown quite a bit faster than Orange County has. It's also meant that the local economy, as vibrant as it happens to be, it was hard hit during the turndown, during the shutdown, and during the in the subsequent months. That shows up over here. In fact, Orange County was harder hit than the Inland Empire. It was somewhat harder hit than California as a whole. Only Los Angeles County took a bigger hit in terms of job losses than Orange County did. As the economy grows, as Orange County's economy grows in the coming years, what we have to be aware of is that it's going to continue to, its growth will continue to outpace its local labor force growth. So non-farm jobs, which are the wage and salary jobs in our economy, whether we're talking about real estate or manufacturing, we're talking about biopharmaceuticals, other kinds of professional services and the like, those jobs have historically outpaced the growth in the labor force for Orange County. And so what that's meant is that we have to import workers, which is why you see so many people coming in on the 91 freeway and so many of the other toll roads. You see many people loading up the 405 freeway, whether it's coming from points north or points south. That's because Orange County is growing at a faster pace than its labor force is growing. It's also an economy that is incredibly dynamic, and evidence of that comes from looking at the industry structure of the local economy. So what do I mean by that? Well, how big are each of these industries compared to some benchmark? In this case, the benchmark is the state. And so if a given industry is just as large in Orange County as it is in the state, it's going to have what we call location quotient that is equal to 1. So if you take a look at this figure, education has a location quotient of 1. That means Orange County's education sector is about as strong relative to Orange County as education is relative to the state as a whole. But look at these industries that have location quotients bigger than 1. Arts, entertainment, and recreation. So that points to things like Disney, Knott's Berry Farm, and so on. Management of companies and enterprises. Did you know that Orange County is a hotbed for headquarters? Headquarters mainly in fintech, but in a few other sectors of the economy. And that shows up in spades here because it has 60% more management, more industry, 60% higher concentration of businesses in management of companies and enterprises than the state as a whole. Finance and insurance, real estate rental and leasing. Each of these is stronger in Orange County, relatively speaking, than the state as a whole. And many of these industries don't just contribute to jobs, but they contribute to economic growth. They increase the size of the Orange County economic pie. So if we're looking at the outlook for Orange County, not just in the next few months, but over the next several years, this figure tells us that the outlook is good because these leading industries all have great growth potential. In fact, when we take a look at employment projections through 2025, this is something that I do because I do work for other groups in Orange County. We're looking over the next 4 years at somewhere in the neighborhood of about 8% job growth for all jobs. That's all wage and salary jobs in Orange County, with certain sectors of the economy outpacing that job growth, including healthcare and including leisure and hospitality, that is to say tourism. Professional, scientific, and technical services includes, architecture, engineering, legal services, a whole array of other types of services, including several tech sector industries and associated firms. And then you've got construction also expected to put on a good show over the next several years. Do keep in mind that construction in Orange County refers to people who work for construction firms that happen to have headquarters or offices in Orange County, but the actual activity, the actual construction could be anywhere around Southern California, around the nation, or around the globe. So as we look at the next 18 months, we'll be watching the hardest hit sectors of the economy to see how they turn around and really get back on their feet. We have certain hard hit sectors of the economy that are already in a recovery mode, so that's good. And what we expect to do well in the coming months are many real estate related and logistics related sectors of the economy. And as I said a moment ago, the long-term growth prospects for Orange County really stem from some tech, professional services, financial activities, real estate related activities, and healthcare. Just one more point before we move on. Keep in mind that the labor market and unemployment rate will take some time to recover, even as economic activity picks up, as paychecks start rolling in. Those kinds of things are going to show improvement even before we see jobs fully recover. Now, how about real estate? How about the housing market? Well, you already heard from Otto about the statewide housing market. Last year, home sales in California were up 3.5% compared to 2019. That's in a year-over-year sales figure. And that's quite remarkable considering the plunge that occurred in the first half of the year that appears over here on the right-hand side of the screen. Even home prices are up. They're up to a record high level, in excess of $700,000. So you can see the year-over-year gains in terms of sales and prices as of January of this year. Pretty remarkable considering the fact that we're in the middle of an economic downturn, but pulling out of it. When we take a look at Orange County, we also see that in the months of April and May and June, contrary to the typical seasonal bounce that occurs in spring and early summer, we saw that that sales plunged. And thankfully, sales recovered in the latter part of the year in a way such that we saw that sales for all of 2020 were up 3% after a slow start. Keep in mind, this is all happening in the midst of an economic downturn. And note, I'm not talking about a recession. I'm talking about the pandemic as if it's a downturn, it's an economic disruption, it's a singular event. It's different from a typical economic cycle where we have imbalances in the economy that may cause problems in the recovery cycle. One of the reasons why the expectation is that the housing market can do very well this year, is that many parts of the economy are still intact. They've taken some hits, they've taken some damage, but they're poised to grow, excuse me. And keep in mind what I said about the consumer sector at the national level earlier. The consumer sector is really ready to take off, provided we see signs that the pandemic is under control. So all of that is going to play a role in the housing market in Orange County in 2021. Here we're looking at home prices. I'm sorry, this is out of date. I think these at least the months are backwards. I'll have to fix this slide. I'm not quite sure how this one landed in my deck, but nevertheless, if we look at Orange County's home price, we see that it was up 14%, that sales were up 14% year over year. All in all, as we closed out 2020 and moved into 2021, the housing market really did a remarkable job considering the condition of the economy. Of course, part of the reason for that was record low mortgage rates. This is a 30-year fixed, and you can see that while it's brushing up against the 3% threshold in recent weeks, the fact is that mortgage rates went from what were already low mortgage rates to very low mortgage rates, and then in recent months they were at record low mortgage rates, setting new low records, dropping below 3% really for the first time in 50 years or so. So this continues to be a very favorable environment, fueling the demand for housing at the same time as the lean supply of housing is causing the home prices to escalate. Again, I'm sorry, I'm not quite sure why we're looking at October numbers for unsold inventory. I will fix this in the deck that will be made available to you after the talk, and it'll show the January 2021 numbers and the comparison against the prior month and the prior year. But the fact remains, if we take a look at the slide as shown here, a year ago, inventories were in the neighborhood of 3 or 4 months. Presently, inventories are closer to 1.5 to 2 months. The long run average, just for reference, for the state as a whole, is about 4 months or so inventory for the period of time over the last 15 years. I choose 2005 through 2020 as the point of reference because the advent of technology in real estate, both on the business side and on the consumer side, really materialized in around the middle of the last decade. And so for the years prior to that point in time, unsold inventory, the averages were quite a bit higher than they have been in the years since. So you figure that somewhere around 4 months inventory is the norm in today's housing market. We're well below that right now. And of course, that translates into higher home prices going forward. So affordability with higher home prices, it only goes down even with low mortgage rates. So you can see that affordability in Orange County has fallen from 26% in the fourth quarter of 2019 to 22% in the fourth quarter of 2022. It's a hefty monthly payment for many households. You need to have in the neighborhood of $170,000 minimum qualifying income for a home loan with a 20% down payment and a 30-year fixed rate. So if there's an impediment to the housing market in Orange County in 2021, it will be affordability. But the fact of the matter is that many of the people who become homeowners in today's housing market are people who are double income earners, who make good salaries. Many times they are well educated. These are individuals and households that have a lot of job security, and they have the wherewithal to meet these requirements in order to qualify for a home. So a moment of reality check. We are getting mixed signals in the housing market. At the same time, we talk about record highs in home sales and home prices. We have to acknowledge that homeowners who have either lost jobs or on reduced hours have had trouble making monthly payments. Renters have faced the same circumstances. So as you've seen over the past year, homeowners and renters have all been able to buy time with various programs, forbearance programs, eviction moratoria, rent moratoria, some of which will have been extended through June of this year or even longer. This basically buys time for these households until they can get back on their feet. This was something that we did not do during the Great Recession. And so consequently, what happened was that many households faced financial insecurity. They went into foreclosure, they lost their homes. Having lost their homes and seeing home prices for those homes fall, many other homes in their communities also fell, and that caused a house of cards, if you will, domino effect, leading to all sorts of pain in the housing market as well as the financial markets. So the expectation is that we're not only buying time for these households, but we're also limiting the damage to the housing market and limiting the damage to the financial sector of the economy with these efforts at the present time. So what about construction? So we heard a lot about how people are moving to the suburbs. They want to buy a house that has more space because they're going to be working remotely. That house is going to have to be equipped with a home office, blah, blah, blah. Well, okay, that might have happened to a certain degree, but believe me, I don't think that that's something that's going to become a permanent fixture. And yet what is evident is that when it comes to construction, or when it came to construction last year, there was a definite preference for single family as opposed to multifamily homes. So that might partly have been due to the pandemic and the stir that was caused by the need to, have a home office and the like. So single family homes only edged down slightly from 19 to 2020, but multifamily homes really plunged by 20%. And overall, we just built a little over 100,000 homes last year. That's for the state as a whole. For Orange County, permits are actually down by 40% year over year. So there's a lot of hesitation in the new home market, or at least there was in 2020. I think in 2021, though, low mortgage rates, an improving set of economic circumstances, and a better sense of how the pandemic is going to play out will all play into a better housing market in terms of new home construction in 2021. Now, keep in mind, back at the state level, we probably need to be building somewhere in the neighborhood of 200,000 units per year. So we're not going to get anywhere close to that in 2021, but we're probably going to surpass 100,000 units in 2021 and see a gain over last year. We just need to keep in mind that even as parts of the economy and the housing market are doing well, we've got households that have the resources to be able to capitalize on low mortgage rates and become homeowners. We've got millennials who are in a great position to become homeowners if they've got the financial wherewithal to do so, and there are lots of them. But at the same time, we've got certain homeowners and certain renters who are going to be facing challenges for the next several months before we really see things shape up for them. On the commercial side, we've got vacancy rates for office space that just went through the roof over the course of last year. And what we expect going forward is that the office side of the non-residential side of the market is going to take some time to recover, but those offices will be filled in time. There was already, even before the pandemic, there was already a move toward smaller footprints for office staff, and there was already a move toward more remote work. So the pandemic may have accelerated that, but in time, we're going to see these vacancy rates come down as more firms choose to return to offices, even though they may not need as much space as they did before. On the flip side, industrial vacancy rates have been very low because as the primary port of entry for so many goods that come from overseas, LA and the Inland Empire and Orange County have all been, their industrial space and warehouse space has all been in huge demand. So we've got vacancy rates that in some cases fall below 2%. So as you're looking at the market and consider what's happening, the demographics are going to be favorable in 2021 and for several years to come. The many millennials, first-time home buyers who at some point are going to pull that trigger and decide to buy a home. Okay, we need to remind ourselves that all this talk about home ownership not being as attractive as it used to be, that's just not the case. People want to have their own home. They want to have their own four walls. They want to be able to drive those nails into the walls. All those kinds of things are huge motivations for people to become homeowners. The income gains that we expect to see in the next year and really into 2022 will contribute to the demand for housing. Those low mortgage rates that we expect to continue over the foreseeable future will also fuel demand. At the same time, we expect to see supplies continue to be very lean, both because existing homes are in short supply and because of insufficient new construction. So, when you're talking to buyers, I used to say this when I was at CAR, in the best of all possible worlds, you want to have this trifecta. You find the right home, the right location, and the right rate. You don't always get all of those at once. But if you can get two of the three, boy, it sure makes sense, especially if this purchase of a home is a long-term decision. It makes sense to pull the trigger. And then once you become a homeowner, as we all know, the equity that you gain over the course of the next several years can be rolled into the purchase of a trade-up home. And then you move up that home ownership ladder. On the seller side, there were many people that we think were hesitant to put their homes up for sale during the pandemic. But maybe the time is right for them to consider doing so here in 2021. They'd be selling into a strong market. And it is certainly, of course, a seller's market. That's likely to be the case over the foreseeable future because we just don't see new supply really climbing by any huge measure over the foreseeable future. I just thought I'd want to wrap up by talking about the outlook for the state. And the state of California really thought that it was going to take a hard hit in terms of its revenues through the pandemic because it was kind of banking on the pandemic to be just like every other recession. Fortunately, the stock market has done well. Fortunately, many people have kept their jobs. And so that has translated into a better than expected outlook for personal income tax revenues. Fortunately, even though people aren't going to restaurants, they still bought goods and they bought cars and things like that. So as it turns out, sales and use taxes are about 1% higher than they had projected. These are the two biggest sources of tax revenue for the state government. And at the local level, of course, property taxes are also an important source of revenue. All three of those are faring better than was originally expected as we entered into the pandemic. And so we expect to see state level, local level, school district finances are going to turn out to be better than were originally expected. And once we get people back into those hotels, visiting Anaheim and so many other Orange County communities, we're going to see the hotel taxes come back. That'll be an important source of revenue for local governments. So wrapping up, this is going to be a recovery year. We expect to see GDP recover as early as the second quarter of this year, but no later than the end of this year. As I've said, labor markets in general and job counts in particular take longer to recover, maybe in 2022, maybe in 2023 at the national level, maybe a little bit longer in parts of Southern California. But along the way, certain sectors of the economy will recover earlier and others are going to take longer, mostly those that are face-to-face, those which were hardest hit by the pandemic. And here in California, for now, we're recovering at a somewhat slower pace than the US as a whole. But I would imagine that as we reopen more fully in the second half of this year, or even in the second quarter of this year, we're going to see acceleration because so many of our leading industries are some of the anchor industries for growth in the US economy. But of course, in terms of your own business, you want to track progress at the county level because the reopening of each part of California really is happening at the county and regional level more than anything else. And after we get the pandemic behind us, we have to look once again at the challenges that we face over the long run here in California. We don't have enough homes for people to be able to live here. As Otto pointed out, we had a trickle of out-migration from California in terms of population. The number is less alarming than the reason for that departure, which is that people cannot afford to live here. But we can turn that around if we are able to increase the quantity of homes that we're producing and a mix of homes that match the needs that people have these days. But in order to do that, we have to overcome a lot of hurdles on the regulatory side. We also have to overcome NIMBYism and things like that. It's a long road. And I've been preaching this for many years. I will continue to do so because I know at some point we're finally going to get that housing production that we need. Hopefully it's going to be dictated by local land use decisions and not by decisions that are made at the state level coming down from Sacramento. But let's also not forget that this economy is changing even as we are watching this, this webinar. The 21st century challenges of American workers are quite different than those of the late 20th century American worker. And so we really need to embrace an education strategy that is going to enable our, our workers, our kids, to be able to thrive in this very fast changing environment that will increasingly include automation and tech in just about every aspect of our economy. So we have a long ways to go on both of these fronts, but both of them, if we can achieve these or overcome these challenges, will set ourselves on a path for growth for California over the long run. So on that note, I'm going to stop, say thank you for your time and attention, and I'm going to hand it back to Lori. Thanks a lot.
Great. Thank you, Robert. Thank you, Dr. Kleinhans, for such an incredible presentation. So much data. Everyone is chomping at the bit to get the slides so they can study them. So a reminder to everyone, you will get the recording of this session and the slides emailed to you. There are a few questions in the Q&A. You touched on most of them. So I'm going to highlight the two that I think we didn't really touch on, which is what is the most likely effect on housing and home ownership if the state and federal tax proposals pass?
So I'm not as tuned into the specific state and federal proposals that this person might be thinking of. So I'm less of a tax economist. I'm a regional economist. But let me just say this, on the two coasts, of course, we benefited for years from being able to deduct our mortgage interest and local taxes, state and local taxes, both of which were subject to limitation with the most recent tax cuts that passed just a few years ago. There is talk, I think, of reintroducing, those, well, getting rid of those limits, and I don't know where that's going to go. But certainly, the National Association of Realtors, I'm sure, is going to be advocating for the lifting of those limits and enabling us to deduct the full amount of our mortgage interest and our state and local taxes. That would go a long ways toward making home ownership easier to accomplish, let's say. And, this is a problem on the coasts. It's a problem on the East Coast and a problem on the West Coast. But middle income households who are looking at $500,000 or $700,000 homes or even $1 million homes, they have a difficult time here in California, and it would be most helpful if at least that aspect of the federal tax code could be rolled back. But I'm really out of my league if I'm touching on any other thing. I'll just say one thing about the state, which is that, as you heard my remarks, I know the state wants to advocate and push for more housing locally, and we do need more housing built, but that really should come under the auspices of local land use control. Yet cities across the state have not really stepped up to the plate to build the housing that we need. So we all have to, each of our communities has to take a good long look at what we want our community to look like, say 20 or 30 years out, which is a very tough thing to do. But I think in doing so, we'll get a sense of what we as individual communities need to do in order to crack this housing nut. Thanks.
Great. That's actually a really great response, because we all need to stay in our own lanes And we need to partner with the people that are the experts in other areas, and we need to partner together. And with that too, you're absolutely right. CAR and NAR are keeping a very close watch on all of the tax proposals to make sure that they can fight for what is best for homeownership. So thank you for that answer. Another question that we have is, how do you think we're going to pay all the money back that's been poured into the economy?
Sure. It's a great question. Two things about that. So people are concerned about all the money that's been poured into the economy, that it's going to be inflationary. And so let me touch on that very quickly, and then we'll talk about the payback. So there's a sort of a knee-jerk reaction that many have that if all this stimulus is occurring, that it's going to cause an escalation in the demand for goods and services. That's going to translate into higher prices, that is to say, inflation. Keep in mind that a big part of the spending that the federal government is doing right now is putting money into the pockets of households that otherwise would not have that money to spend on trips to the grocery store, paying for rent, paying for their phone bill. So it's unlikely to give rise to any kind of high levels of inflation over the foreseeable future. Rather, it's going to enable people to continue, hopefully continue to at least achieve a minimum standard of living for several months before they get back on their feet fully. And there is a lot of capacity in our economy to grow. And so it's highly unlikely that we would see any sort of breakout inflation over the foreseeable future. But with respect to paying this back, this is something we should think about. Many economists have this perspective on our federal budget and our national debt. When times are tough, the government can counterbalance the weakness in the private sector with the types of expenditure programs that it's engaged in over the past year. That's a good way to prop up the economy and keep it from sinking further than it otherwise would. So in that sense, deficit spending should not be viewed as a problem. It should be viewed as the right policy at the right time. The flip side is that at some point, namely when our economy is doing well, the people in Washington should contemplate the possibility, however remote, that they'd maybe use a little bit of the revenue that they're getting then to pay off these loans that they're incurring right now. That is a very tough sell. It's been a very tough sell for decades on both sides of the aisle. And so, but what happens is that whichever party is not in power at any point in time is the one that talks about these deficits and the national debt getting out of control. Both sides of the aisle, both Republicans and Democrats and all Americans have to recognize that at some point when our economy is doing well, that's a good time for us to chip away at the deficit and chip away at the national debt. We can do this. We can incur this debt right now, especially bearing in mind that interest rates are very low. So the service on the debt is manageable. But we really need to think long-term about how to remedy this and not be in a situation where this is going to continue.
Great, thank you for that. You know, we have a few other questions. With your permission, I would like to ask if we can send you a couple of these and maybe you can reply to them and we'll include it in the email.
That'd be great.
That way we can honor everybody's time. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thanks for monitoring the questions. I appreciate it, Lori.
Absolutely. So everybody, before we go, I want to quickly remind you of the following events and opportunities, which are always free to our members. We have our annual election of directors. Applications are due March 19th, and the election is in May. Please vote. Look for your Orange County Realtor magazine in the mail. It comes out every 2 months. We have a wonderful education calendar in there. So go to the website or look in the magazine for our schedule of events. You can also get involved through committee service. Remember to apply this summer when the applications come out. And please attend our marketing meetings that are happening every week. Attend them on Zoom. One day they will be back live in person, but for now we're still on Zoom, and those meetings are a great way to stay connected and see the inventory. Also, please be sure to attend our designation focused educational weeks. Those are also in the magazine. and participate in our new broker roundtable for all brokers, risk managers, office managers. Our first one is March 25th from 2 to 3:30. And of course, the highly anticipated SoCal Rexpo is coming this summer. And remember to refer to our affiliate reference guide when you're looking for business partners to support your business. That came in the mail just a couple weeks ago. So I want to thank our sponsor, J&J Lending and John Soricelli. Thank you so much for sponsoring this wonderful event today. And also to San Diego County Credit Union, Erica Beach, thank you as well. And of course, Presidents-elect Leslie Ruda Smith and Otto Katrina, we just are so honored that you would participate with us today and give us those incredible updates. And for sharing such insight, Dr. Robert Kleinhens from Kleinhens Economics, we look forward to having you again in the future. Thank you to all of our members for your membership and for your time with us today. As we mentioned a couple of times, you will receive the slides and the replay in your email in the next few days, and you'll also be able to find it online. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day.